Hello, everyone, and welcome to Saturday morning. It's from the hills of Eastern Kentucky. Here we are, way up in a holler. Yep, literally. I don't know. I thought I would try something today because I just thought maybe it was time for us to kind of figure out a way for us to um, regain or restore the power that we've had, the authority that we've had in our own lives to take back our lives. So, how do we go about taking back our lives? Well, that's a real challenge for a lot of people. And so I just wanted to address that because right now we're seeing an awful lot of things, lots and lots of things that are going and attacking the rights of some of your fellow Americans. And so I just wanted to make sure that you're aware of all of these things. I know that you are if you're a transgender person or a transgender veteran. Then we've got a lot of stuff that works against us these days. And we have to take our agency back. We've got to get it back, okay? And how do you do that? Well, you have to start taking care of yourself. That's the first thing. Address your own concerns, personal things directly yourself, head face to face, and start taking ownership of who you are and where you are and living your life accordingly. That's the difficult part for most people, is that they have a difficult time actually figuring out how to do those things, given that all of the attacks, all of the assaults against the rights of some of our fellow Americans is just so egregious. It's so difficult. I mean, it's so kind of overpowering at times. So I wanted to give you a couple of ways that I kind of deal with it. One is I connect to the community around here where I live, the local community right here in the hills, Appalachia. That's where I'm from. That's where I am right now in Appalachia. And so it's important for me to connect with people here. And there are good people here. There are a lot of good people here. They generally want to just let people live and live, let them live and let live. That's the way I wanted to say that. And we need to start changing the way we describe things. For instance, this is not about trans rights. This is about personal freedom. That's what this is. This is personal freedom. And that's what's under threat right now. Let me see if I can pull up a little screen I've got going over here on the side. Give me 1 second. Here we go. So this is all about personal freedom. And that's what we need to be keying on. This is not about, the rights of one minority population or different minority populations at all. This is about personal freedom. And that's a very conservative position to take, right? Don't you think so? That's very conservative, or it should be at least. You would think that there would be people out there who are standing up in defense of personal freedom. And you would think they'd also be standing up in opposition to things like, the doctors being beholden to the federal government, or the federal government getting in between your doctor and you. Nobody wants the federal government between. I don't want anybody, but I want to deal with my doctor. I don't want to have to deal with the feds up here saying, oh, the doctor can't do that kind of stuff. No, that's not the feds' business. It's not the state's business either, because I want to be able to walk into that doctor's office and be able to take care of whatever issues that confront me or that deal with me that I need to address without having to trip over eggshells because there's some federal policy somewhere along the line that says, oh, you got to watch out for that group of people right there. They don't deserve care. No, that's not the way it works, folks. This is about personal freedom. And that's a very conservative and libertarian leaning way of thinking, right? Nobody wants the federal government in any of this stuff. We don't want it. You want it out of your businesses, right? I know I did when I had all my businesses, different ones. I didn't want the government interfering in my operations, but also didn't want to harm anyone or hurt anyone or cause any kind of problems for people. But at the same time, I didn't want there to be a lot of overpowering rules and regulations that said, this is how you should operate, because I'm the one who has to go out and make the money. No, this is a conservative issue for all of us. So one of the biggest ones, let me see if I can pull it back up here. I don't know what happened to it. This one should be run across the bottom of the screen right now. Politicians. I don't want a politician standing in the way between me and my doctor. What is that? Really? None of us want that. So how do you take all that stuff back? Well, we've got to start calling it what it is. This is about personal freedom. This is about some politicians wanting to bully people and harm them just for the sake of cruelty. That's what Hegseth is doing. It's just cruelty. He was in a House meeting the other day. I think it was a House meeting. And a House meeting the other day, and this representative from San Diego was pointedly telling him, hey, look, you base things on meritocracy, right? And he agrees. And she said, you've got a lot of men and women in the military who have been advanced meritocratically. What's that word? I kind of got twisted there. But we've got those things, and that's what it is. And so Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense, he's saying all this kind of stuff. And then she lists off 3 women who have exceptional military records, who have been in the service for 20 years, more than 20, 2 officers and 1 enlisted person. And their records are exemplary. All of their performance evaluations have been exceptional, have been really good. And yet we've got people who are saying, well, let me finish the story about that. But this is what she's talking. She rattled down what they were doing. One of them was a combat pilot, been in combat many, many times as a fighter pilot. Another one was a major in the, I think it was Air Force, might have been. And then there was a non-commissioned officer, an enlisted person, who was responsible for training other people. And they all of them received enormous praise for the work that they had done. And they had done it so well for the whole team. And they were exceptional leaders. The Congresswoman looks at Pete Hegseth and says, so those women right there should be merit. Would you agree that merit is actually important here, that they should be retained and pushed forward? And obviously Hegseth goes, yes. But then she said, but all 3 of them are transgender women. And then Pete decides to turn it into something about mental health. And really, it's not about mental health. They were diagnosed with gender dysphoria to be able to get where they are. But that in and of itself is not a medical thing that actually, there's not something that needs to be addressed in terms of kicking people out. It does not cause problems. These people have been successful in their roles in the military, but yet he kicked them out. And so why? Why? Well, it's just cruelty. And his faith says that too. I mean, you shouldn't have people like that around, right? Anyway, so how do we take back our agency? How do we take back our power and live our lives in such a way that we can overcome these things? First, you have to know that it is not a short-term, easy thing to do. It is not something that can be done overnight. It's very strategic. It may even take decades to undo what's been done here, this administration. But you have to be prepared for that. The way to deal with these things is stop feeding the anger over on the right. Stop feeding them. Stop falling in for their narrative. They control the narrative on certain terms and words and things like that. They control it. We don't. We've lost that narrative. We've lost the ability to do much about it, because every time any of us use certain words, they rail against it. And then also yesterday, when I first started talking about this kind of thing during the noon hour, I didn't know anything about another report that had come out the same day from Third Way. And it was talking about certain words that we just need to get away from because they're kind of arrogant and, they're academic sounding words. And so guess what? Fox locked onto it by the 5 o'clock hour. Fox had locked onto it and it became something as part of the 5. They did it. Greg Gutfield talked about it. These words that this organization, Third Way, says we need to get away from because they disenfranchise people. They kind of turn people off. And that is true. That is so true. But Fox knows how to turn those things into that kind of stuff into a propaganda tool for them. They immediately went after it. Went after the thing that is published in Politico at first, but the Politico article came from Third Way, and it matched exactly basically what I was saying at the noontime hour. So here we go. I didn't know they were doing it, and I don't know if they knew I was doing it, but we all came out the same day saying, we got to change the way we're talking about stuff. And it sure felt like Fox was just going, here's Cassandra talking about stuff again. But no, it was actually from Third Way. I think they may have heard me because there was a bunch of people show up in the noontime hour listening in. And I'm like, really? Who's here? But anyway, so yeah, Fox picked it up last night, and this morning on the big weekend show on Fox, that list of words has been topic of derision and comedy over on Fox News. You have the three people sitting on the couch on Fox News, the big weekend show, and they're using those words from that list and making fun of it all and talking to each other using that language from that list of words. And obviously, they're being viciously funny, cruelly funny. And it was funny to a certain extent to hear them say these kind of things because they never say words like that. What do they use? They use words that actual people actually use out here in the real world and not in academia. So when they start talking like using intersectionality and birthing person and, let me see, words like that, it sounds funny from them and they're laughing about it. But what they're doing is making fun of the fact that these people over here on the left and the new and the Third Way is actually center left organization. So they were saying, stop using these words. And then obviously Fox picked it up, and it's going to be talked about all weekend long. It'll be mentioned all weekend long on all of their shows this weekend. Because why? They saw something and they immediately went after it and tied it into just how they're basically saying the Democrats and the liberals and the progressives over on the left, they realize that these words are causing harm to them and their messaging, and that it turns people off, which it does. We have to acknowledge that, right? You got to stand up and acknowledge those facts. That's the case. You don't go around telling that this is just a pregnant person, whatever, or an inseminated person or a birthing person or something like this. It's a pregnant woman. All right. Just get down and call it what it is. Stop using all those words. Get away from things like gender affirming care, even. Because immediately when you use that turn of phrase right there, it says academic. And from the pushing by and the propaganda blasting that's been going on since last year, really, when $200 million was spent by the Trump administration on, she wants you to just acknowledge they, them, or something like that. Kamala Harris, they went after Kamala Harris with that ad. It was an effective ad. So, yeah, we've lost the narrative on those words like that. They're academic words. They put people off. They're arrogant. We don't, you're going to use, LGBTQIA plus, whatever. You're going to use the whole long acronym of all the words out there. If we start using those things, if we use those things all the time, it immediately turns off the center of the country. Immediately. So how do you take back control of those things? Well, for one thing, I sure don't want politicians between me and my doctor. It's life-saving medicine and care that I receive. Life-saving medicine. And that is not just for me. It's transgender Americans. It's any American. It's every American. There's not a single American out there who would raise their hands and shout hallelujah for having the politician stand in the doorway at your doctor office and say, nope, you can't get care, or you can, and that's only the amount of care that you can get. And we don't acknowledge you and your insurance company. We're going to try to roll back everything that they do to take care of you. We'll make it hard for you to get care. We're going to make Dr. Oz over at the Center for Medicare Services we're going to make sure that he's out here telling people that you can't get this kind of care. We're going to strip away certain things in the that the Medicaid services uses, and that actually impacts your insurance companies because, you know, if CMS doesn't cover it, then why on earth would insurance companies want to cover it, right? Because then that's what they're doing. They're pushing this insurance companies to abide by their definitions so they can get paid. If an insurance company turns in something using an old term that Dr. Oz has actually said, no, we can't use terms like that, then guess what? It's not going to get paid. And therefore, the insurance company will roll back that kind of care. So I don't want a politician between me and my doctor. You don't want a politician between your doctor either, and you or your family members. I don't want a politician standing in the way of care for my mom, who I'm a caregiver for, or for my sister, who I'm a caregiver for also, or my brother, who I have to look out for because, you know, he keeps pushing. He keeps pushing. I'm proud of him for pushing. I love him to death, but he's got some issues that have to do with his lungs and his heart and all kinds of stuff like that. And he's younger than me, and it's very worrisome, much more so than my mom and sister. And then I've got my cousin Lois, who I actually check in on, make sure she's all right, but she's good generally. So I don't want a politician in between. Do you? Are you telling me that you want a politician standing in the door of your doctor's office and saying, hey, we don't want you in here, or we're not going to cover that? Is that what you want? That is not a liberal position. That's a human position. You don't want that politician in there. Why on earth would you allow that politician to be in there threatening your well-being and your health? Why would you have a politician standing in front of your psychologist if you're going to get some kind of care? You've had depression, or you've got some other issues that you're dealing with. You go to your psychologist and they say, we don't cover that, but you can only get this kind of care here from your psychologist. And we don't accept certain psychologists because, you know, they were trained by certain organizations that were woke. Yeah, that's where it's headed. You don't want that politician in the way of any of your care, do you? Be honest with yourself. Do you really want that for anyone? No. And that's what is going on now at the federal government, in the halls of Congress, across the executive branch right now under President Trump, and also in your state houses around this country. We have allowed politicians to stand in the door, you know, like George Wallace standing in the door at the University of Alabama back in the 60s saying, we will not. We're not going to allow people to come in here that we don't want in here. No black people can be enrolled at the University of Alabama. That was George Wallace in the early 60s. He changed his tune later, though, because, you know, he kind of liked being governor. And everybody loved his wife, Lurleen Wallace. Okay. So anyway, back to, yeah, I've lived down there. I lived in Tuscaloosa. I've heard those stories. I know about that. I've read about them. Yeah. So segregation now and segregation yesterday, segregation today, and segregation tomorrow. George Wallace. But that's what you're doing now. You're letting a politician stand in the door. Do you really want that? So how do we take all that back? Well, it's not going to be easy. That's the first thing. The second thing is we are going to have to look inward and find those things that make us unique, and then that make us just as human as everybody else too. Unique? Sure. Different? Sure. Same as? Absolutely. There's no distinctions. So you've got to start calling it what it is. This is bullying from politicians. It's cruelty from those politicians if they're standing in the door and telling you that you can't get that particular type of care because you don't qualify for that, or you don't meet all the conditions for a heart attack, or you've got to have some kind of bypass procedure and they won't let you do it, or you've got to have some kind of PET scan, but you have to get it approved through your insurance company because a politician said that that's what you had to do. And that's what I'm dealing with. That's what we're dealing with right now with my brother, because the doctor's office called and said, we've got to get the insurance company to approve this PET scan so that they can look at his lungs and heart and see what's going on. try to get a better understanding of all of that stuff, but the politicians are standing in the door. We let them. We elected these people thinking that they would be decent human beings, but in most cases, they just want to retain power. They're cruel and they're bullies. And that's what's going on right now. And you can take that back, but you're going to have to start talking about life-saving medicine, everyone's freedom. This is about everyone's freedom. If it impacts one person, they can write those rules and take care of and do something to attack anyone and stand in that doorway like George Wallace. So that's what we have to start talking about. This is what's going on right now. One of the biggest examples right now that I can come to think of would be this carrier letter that was sent out earlier in the week to all of the federal employees. That carrier letter is a new policy guideline that has to do with health coverage for people with gender dysphoria. That policy says the government will not cover any kind of health care for gender dysphoria among federal employees. Why not? They take care of everything for everybody else, right? If you go in there and you have a problem with erectile dysfunction, they're going to give you some Viagra. If you go in there and you have a problem with, I don't know, you've got a child who happens to have, a cleft lip, you could actually get that taken care of through this insurance policy with the federal government. But when it comes to somebody who has gender dysphoria, the cruelty is the point. The bullying is the point. You've got politicians standing in the way of that doctor and your care, and then writing the insurance rules to make sure that you don't get covered. That is hugely discriminatory, hugely hateful. Why? What's the purpose? Well, we're going to have to start doing what Fox News has been doing. They keep an eye on all. Now, look, I want to be clear about this. We can't get over into the weeds when we start talking about this stuff first. First, I want to say that you can't start pulling out the academic jargon and all this kind of stuff and changing the words and using this and that. Speak like you're talking to someone right here in these hills of Eastern Kentucky. One of your friends, one of my classmates, or somebody here from Eastern Kentucky, from Southern West Virginia. They understand all those words. They fully understand just about every one of those academic words. But when you say it, immediately they turn you off. They will not hear you. They won't remember it either. But if you want to have an impact, you got to talk here in this way. And you got to start doing what Fox does, though, too, because even though we want to be strategic in all of this kind of thing, what Fox has done since yesterday over this word stuff coming out of the third way, what Fox has done with that is as soon as it became obvious to them that that's what was going on, they weaponized it against us and then started making jokes about it. It's going to show up on Fox is going to just run with it because they see it as, just proof that the Democrats are just trying to do whatever they can. They're going to change here's what they're saying. They're going to change the words and make it sound more American sounding, like real American. I call it real American. Oh my God, I can't stand that. Somebody did over on X the other day. That cat turd guy. Yeah, that guy. He's actually involved with the Trump administration, but he calls himself cat turd. Somebody needs to put some, some litter around for him in a litter box. I think he might belong in that litter box. He's probably the only one who might. I wonder how he feels about that. But anyway, Cat Turd over on X was saying something about, oh my God, I lost my train of thought. Well, he was talking as he always does, and I always talk back to him if I can. So, Lord, I forgot what it was I was going to say about it. I got distracted by the litter box. Oh, anyway, so talking points, folks, talking points. You've got to know what to say and get away from all those words because it doesn't impress anyone. You may impress your academic friends, you may impress academia, and you may be able to get a paper published using words like that. As long as it's peer reviewed, you might be able to do something like that. But most people, I don't know what it was, Real American now, because he mentioned something about Real Americans. He says only real Americans do this, that, and the other. And I said, look, cat turd. If you were born here and you're naturalized here, you're a real American. There's no caveats to that. There's nothing that says, oh, you got to be ideologically the same. You got to be the same color, the same faith, the same whatever. Believe the same things, love the same way, look the same way. No, there are no caveats to those things in the 14th Amendment. Born here, naturalized here. You're a real American. But to throw out that word to kind of divide people. So that's what I told him. Stop being divisive or divisive, however you want to pronounce it, whichever region of the country you're from. Anyway, I could go on and on and on today, but I just wanted to come across a few of those things first. And another point I wanted to say, whenever we're talking out here, we're talking to people about all this stuff, talk about people, not ideas, not concepts, nothing like that. They don't care about the concepts. They don't care about the biology. They don't care about real science either. And they're going to keep saying, this is real biology and this is real genetics. And actually what they mean is this is 1950s science and 1950s genetics. But people's eyes glaze over when you start talking like that. They go, oh, not another pontificator, not another professor talking down to us. And I've come across like that, and I've been really bad about it. And I have to apologize for that, but I'm working on it. It's a work in progress. I can get very academic really quickly, really easily. So focus on people, individuals. How do you think Fox News has been able to take control of the narrative, let's say on immigrants, or let's say on trans people, let's say on any particular topic that they disagree with? You know how they've done it? One bad story at a time. One bad story at a time about that particular population of people. And those stories are horrendous. Those stories are bad, okay? And they don't even care that it represents only 1 out of a million. They don't care about that. It's the one story that matters. It's the one story that gets to people, and they keep repeating it and repeating it and repeating it and talking about it. It comes up in every conversation on every show. It's just that one bad incident, the one bad person, or the 2 or 3 or whatever it was, whether it's trans people, transgender athletes, transgender women in women's sports, or immigrants who have been molesting people, killing people, or pedophiles, or things like that. One bad story out of how many illegal immigrants are in the country? They estimate 20 million. It could be more than that. It could be a lot less than that. Who knows? But it doesn't matter. They don't care about the big numbers. They don't care that it only represents a small percentage of that population of people. They just nail that one story and then hammer it to everyone viciously. So much so that you believe that's what all of them are like. That's the whole idea, to make you think that this applies to the entire population of illegal immigrants, the entire population of transgender people. They want you to think that they're all that way. And if they can get you to think that all of this applies to all of them, regardless of population, then they won. They've got your vote. And then what do? Oh, we go back and say, but the statistics are this and statistics are that. And that's what they did in DC. Remember what they did in DC? They were saying crime is down in DC. The statistics show that it's down. All they have to have over on the right is 1 or 2 stories of violence in the city of DC, and they'll hammer that and hammer that. like what was that guy's name that got beat up by the 4 teenage kids or 3 teenage kids, big balls? The person who was actually part of the Musk team, Doge, at one time. They look for one story like that, and they will tell you that it doesn't matter what the stats are. This is happening now. They don't care about the stats. They don't care about the science. They've got that one story that they can manipulate and push out there and keep hammering and hammering and hammering. And then it will not matter what the statistics say. People have been desensitized to science, desensitized to the statistics. And I know a little bit about both, but it doesn't matter. You could rattle off all the stats you want, and it's not going to change the narrative that they have already beat you to. And that's where we are right now. So, one final thing I want to say. I just mentioned that it was about people and not concepts or ideas or academic jargon. But the final thing I'll mention right now before I close out for the day, because I have a funeral to go to at noon for a high school classmate. Whenever we're talking about all these distinctions, kind of force a moral choice. Force a moral choice. How do you do that? Well, you look at someone and you say, are you on the side of kindness or cruelty? Which do you support? Kindness or the schoolyard bully? Which do you support? A politician standing in the door of your medical care, blocking you from getting the care, and it doesn't matter who you are. If you're an American and there's a politician standing in that door, are you on the side of that politician standing in the door of the care for Americans? Are you on the side of kindness or cruelty? Anyway, have a great Saturday, everyone, and we'll see.